This is a real human brain. Well, it was, until a hot cloud of ash turned it into glass. This crazy transformation happened almost 2,000 years ago, when Mount Vesuvius decided it was a good day to erupt and destroy cities like Pompeii, Atlantis, and Herculaneum. This particular brain belonged to a young man who lived in 79 CE in Herculaneum. Not the most famous Roman town, but it was the first place that was discovered under Vesuvius's ashes way back in 1709. Around 200 years later, archaeologists found the remains of this young man lying face down on a bed. All the smoke and ash probably made him disoriented, so while most of the citizens of Herculaneum rushed to the shore, hoping to be rescued, the brain guy ended up trapped inside a building and passed out. Weirdly enough, this saved his brain from completely disappearing. How in the world does a brain turn into glass? Well, when Mount Vesuvius erupted, it didn't expel just lava. It also sent away a really hot cloud of ash before the solidified lava could flow down. This type of lava, known as pyroclastic flow, could get as hot as 869 degrees Fahrenheit. An insane temperature, we know. Hot enough to melt your brain, but not hot enough to turn it into glass. The cloud of ash, however, can reach temperatures between 932 degrees Fahrenheit to 1,112 degrees Fahrenheit. But to turn something into glass, you don't just need heat, you need rapid cooling too. To put it simply, you have to heat something to a very high temperature until it melts into a liquid. If you let it cool down slowly, the molecules of this liquid will start to calmly organize themselves in the shape of crystals. But if this something cools down super fast, it will solidify in whatever shape the liquid was. It's like making ice cubes. If you pour water into a tray and stick it in the freezer, it will turn into ice because it cools down quickly. But if you leave the water out at room temperature, it'll just evaporate. This means that the brain melted due to a really high temperature, but before it could crystallize, for example, or just boil away, it got really cold. The flow from the eruption was not hot enough for this to happen, but the cloud of ash that reached town before the pyroclastic flow was hot enough to start this process, and fast enough to leave just at the right time. To figure out the exact temperature needed for this brain-to-glass transformation, scientists used a technique called differential scanning calorimetry. This fancy name basically means that they heat up glass shards to see when they start to change shape. They discovered that the cloud of ash had to be exactly 950 degrees Fahrenheit hot for the brain cells to start melting. Now, remember how I said this guy was inside a building, but most of the citizens were outside? Well, those people were also exposed to this drastic change in temperature, but they didn't turn into glass because they were not being protected by the walls of a building. The protection provided by the skull surely helped our guy, but it was not enough. And since other people didn't have the same protection, their brains basically poofed. And before you ask, no other parts of his body turned into glass. You see, you need some liquid for the glass-making process to happen. The brain has a lot of water and fat, which makes it a prime candidate for the glassification process. Yes, I've just made that word up. Other organs might have contained liquid, but they weren't as protected as the brain, so they were destroyed by the heat. And bones? Well, bones don't have enough liquid, so they just remained the same. The ones that didn't char, anyway. When the brain turned into glass, it looked a lot like an obsidian stone, a type of volcanic glass formed by the cool lava of a volcano. Even the forensic archaeologist who discovered this glassified brain thought it was just a stone at first. He was studying the bones of our hero when he noticed something shining inside of his skull, right in the middle of all the volcanic ash that filled it. To his surprise, this thing was way more fragile than obsidian and smaller too, with some fragments being only a few millimeters large. He only figured this was part of that guy's brain after he took the glass to the lab. With the help of a microscope, he discovered that this was not a stone but an organic tissue, which is basically cells that form our organs. This organic tissue was made by protein, a molecule produced by living things like animals and plants. And this was not just any protein. This one was specific to the human brain because every organ is made of different types of protein. The researchers also found nerve cells preserved inside this glass, complete with the tendrils that help them receive and send messages. The microscope also showed what was left of myelin, a fatty substance that gives a speed boost to the messages traveling along the nerves. This isn't the first time scientists discovered preserved human brains. In fact, more than 4,000 brains have been found since the 17th century. It may not look like a big number, but keep in mind that finding only the brain preserved in a skeleton while the other organs are gone is not that common. You see, the human brain is actually the first thing that decomposes when we're 6 feet under, and it usually turns into liquid. When scientists stumble upon a human brain, it's usually dried, frozen, or literally turned into soap. A brain can be dehydrated if a person perishes in a place that is very hot, like a desert. Frozen brains are found, obviously, in places that are super cold, like polar tundras. A brain turned into soap may sound weird, but the saponification process is not that rare. You need a lot of fat and oils to make soap, and the human brain is filled with this. It's a complex process, but if you find a brain that turned into soap, it must have been buried in a place that is very wet and has little oxygen. Back in 1982, for example, construction workers found dozens of human skeletons in a pond in Florida. They were all 8,000 years old, and 91 of them actually had their brains still somewhat intact. And by intact, I mean they turned into jelly soap. During the 2000s, the brains of 45 people were found in Spain, preserved because of this saponification process. This discovery helped researchers understand the chemical composition of the brains and even the weather conditions of the moment when these people passed away. Scientists also discovered two 3,700-year-old brains in Turkey that belonged to a middle-aged man and a teenager that were trying to escape an attack on their city. This time, the brains turned into charcoal because of a super hot fire. And even though their skulls preserved the brains in this state, the heating and cooling process was probably not intense enough to glassify them. But this? It's the first time in history that scientists have found a brain that naturally turned into glass. It's like finding a unicorn, but in a more scientific way. So what does this discovery mean? Well, for starters, it gives us a glimpse into the lives of those who existed such a long time ago. Secondly, it taught scientists an amazing way to preserve the human brain. It also shows just how powerful nature can be. Powerful enough to turn a brain into glass, but delicate enough to preserve it for thousands of years. So, let's give a shout out to the young man who unknowingly contributed to science. He probably had no idea that his brain would one day be the star of a groundbreaking discovery. His tragic end has given us a fascinating peek into the past.
You're walking through a bustling town near the Bay of Naples. It looks full of life, energy, and healthy food. Look at these flatbreads that might have been ancient pizza, no less. The people of Pompeii are living their best lives. But all of that comes to a fiery halt in 79 CE. That's when Mount Vesuvius, that unassuming mountain looming over the city, decides it's time to make history. And the result is a tragic story that archaeologists are still piecing together 2,000 years later. Now, if you think Pompeii was some boring, dusty old place, well, think again. This was a lively, buzzing town. There were farmers bringing in fresh produce, merchants selling their goods, bakers cranking out bread and pizza-like flatbreads, and gladiators gearing up for fights in the amphitheater. The people of Pompeii loved decorating their homes with frescoes, mosaics, and statues. And food was a big deal. Pompeii was home to some of the earliest restaurants, called Thermopylae, where people could grab hot meals on the go. But let's get back to the fateful day when this beautiful, simple life ended. The saddest thing is that the people of Pompeii had warnings. They just didn't know it. Around 4 days before Vesuvius erupted, there had been minor tremors, but the locals were used to earthquakes. They had a massive one in 62 CE that destroyed lots of buildings, but they rebuilt the town and kept living there. No one thought, hey, maybe that giant mountain is the problem. So by the time 79 CE rolled around, Pompeii was back to normal, or so they thought. Now it's the morning of the eruption, just another regular day. People are working, shopping, and chilling in the baths. And then, out of nowhere, Vesuvius erupts. It was a catastrophic explosion that shot a plume of ash, gas, and rocks 20 miles into the sky. Pliny the Younger, a Roman writer who watched this disaster unfold from across the bay, wrote that it looked like a pine tree of fire and smoke rising into the heavens. Suddenly, it began raining with ash. First it was a drizzle, then it started coming in buckets. Gray, heavy rain that didn't let you breathe. Then hail began falling from the sky. But it wasn't hail. Those were pumice stones, light chunks of volcanic rock. They were smashing roofs and windows and piling up in the streets. That's when people started panicking. Some of them decided to escape, so they ran from the town. Others thought the walls of their homes would protect them. Well, they didn't. Soon things turned even worse. The ash had covered Pompeii's streets, and buildings were collapsing under its weight. But the real nightmare came early the next morning. Pyroclastic flows, a fatal avalanche of superheated gas, ash, and rock that was racing down the side of a volcano at more than 200 miles per hour. The heat alone, around 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, instantly finished the life of anyone who ended up in the way of the flow. When the pyroclastic flows hit Pompeii, it was, unfortunately, game over for the town. Those who decided to stay in the city didn't stand a chance. The people were trapped so quickly that their bodies were left frozen in their last moments, some shielding their faces, others holding loved ones. In one bakery, archaeologists found the skeletons of 3 people who'd stayed behind. They thought the oven's stone walls would protect them. But those just weren't strong enough to resist the elements. When the eruption finished, Pompeii was covered with 20 feet of volcanic debris. What archaeologists eventually found when they uncovered the town was both mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. Because Pompeii was buried so suddenly, everything remained preserved: homes, streets, art, food, and even people. These days, scientists are rethinking what we know about the victims of the Pompeii disaster, thanks to new DNA evidence. Apparently, a lot of our assumptions about who these people were might be way off. A recent study by researchers from the US and Italy has shaken things up. They found that some of the victims, who they assumed were family members, weren't related at all. On top of that, the gender of some individuals was misidentified. The researchers believe that older interpretations were influenced by modern ideas about gender and relationships, which might have clouded the actual history. One of the study's co-authors from the University of Florence pointed out that conclusions based on limited evidence often reflect the biases of the time. Back then, researchers had to rely on the physical appearance of casts to make their guesses. Now, with DNA evidence, the story looks very different. Let's look at the case of the so-called family found in the House of the Golden Bracelet, which was discovered in 1974 on a Pompeii hillside. This group of 4 victims was named after an elaborate piece of jewelry was found on one of them. Based on the cast, one of the figures, who was holding a child, was assumed to be a mother. But the DNA results revealed this person was in fact a man. Even more surprising, none of the individuals were related, as scientists thought previously. Not surprising, given the extreme confusion and terror the people experienced as they desperately took shelter anywhere they could. Another interesting finding involves a pair of victims once thought to be sisters or a mother and daughter. DNA evidence now suggests that one of them was biologically male. Altogether, the researchers have analyzed the remains of 14 individuals for this study, and this is just a small portion of more than 1,000 victims of Mount Vesuvius's eruption that have been found so far. Archaeologists in Pompeii have also made one more discovery. Look at this figure. Initially, everyone believed that this man had been crushed by a massive boulder, a stone block that might have been part of a door frame during the eruption. His skull, with its mouth open as if in a final gasp, was found near his body. He was probably trying to escape all the chaos when it happened. But new evidence suggests that wasn't the case. His demise was likely the result of asphyxiation from a pyroclastic flow. For a long time, people thought Vesuvius erupted on August 24th. That's what some evidence seemed to suggest. But over the years, archaeologists started finding evidence that pointed to a later date. For example, they found graffiti dating back to late October and food remains, such as pomegranates. Such products wouldn't have been around in August yet. Plus, they found heating braziers in homes. Who would need extra heat in the summer of Italy? So, most experts agree that the eruption happened in late October. Now, it turns out that not everyone in Pompeii passed away. Scientists think that 15,000 people lived in the town, and only about 2,000 of them didn't survive the disaster. It means thousands of people managed to escape. But at the same time, their lives changed forever. They didn't have homes to come back to. Imagine fleeing your home with nothing but the clothes on your back, leaving behind everything you've ever known. Some survivors made it to nearby cities like Naples, but they had to start over from scratch. But recently, archaeologists made a pretty cool discovery: a fresco of a flatbread that might have been the ancient ancestor of pizza. Researchers found this painting in a house near a bakery. It shows a round bread sitting on a silver platter next to a goblet. They think people might have eaten this bread with fruits like pomegranates or dates, or maybe topped with spices or a kind of pesto. But the coolest part is that Pompeii is just 14 miles from Naples, which is the modern home of pizza. The director of Pompeii pointed out how this discovery connected a simple poor man's dish from ancient times to the modern pizza we all know and love. Today, Pompeii is one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world. Every year, new discoveries help us understand Roman life of those times even better.
The story of Pompeii is complete chaos as is, but to add a little fuel to this fire, we dug up some groundbreaking facts, and I mean that quite literally. Hear me out. What if it wasn't the scorching sea of lava that destroyed the city of Pompeii, but rather an earthquake that happened during the volcano's eruption? Rewind to over 2,000 years ago. The year is 79 BCE. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Mount Vesuvius decided to erupt. Pompeians were going on with their normal daily routines when lava started taking over. The flow of lava was so quick that most people didn't have anywhere to run. The disaster took the lives of around 2,000 people. The lava covered most of the city, which then turned everything to ashes. Pompeii was only discovered during the 16th century of our Common Era, when an architect commended a dig to divert a river. It's a very well-studied site nowadays, but something unusual recently caught the researchers' attention. Scientists were excavating a site called the House of Painters at work. They were examining a couple of skeletons when they saw something weird. The skeletons probably belonged to two men around the age of 50. The analysis showed these men had survived the first surge of lava in the city. But they didn't make it out due to this second unexpected part: the earthquake. The men probably took shelter at the House of Painters at work, but the walls crumbled down when the earthquake hit. The men were found in a protective posture, like they were trying to shield themselves from something that was going to fall above their heads. Plus, these skeletons were not found under the layer of volcanic ash, but on top of it, proving that they really did survive Vesuvius's sea of lava. It turns out this is not as rare as it seems. A volcanologist explained that the seismic activity during the eruption really made things worse in Pompeii. He said that this seismic chaos probably influenced the desperate choices of a lot of Pompeians in their final moments. This is not the first time the world heard of a possible earthquake in Pompeii. A guy named Pliny the Younger, who escaped the disaster and witnessed the whole thing, beat these scientists to it in his famous letters. Pliny the Younger was a lawyer and an important person back in ancient Rome. He was an eyewitness to the whole Pompeii disaster, And he wrote in one of his letters that the eruption was followed by a trembling of the earth. Researchers do agree that something never added up. Pompeii is known to have really well-preserved skeletons since the ashes kind of played an important role in preserving them. But the buildings were in horrible shape, making it hard to reconstruct the entire city as it once was. Pompeii was indeed one of a kind. It was one of the most vibrant and lively cities of the ancient Roman Empire. The city was huge. It could have been home to as many as 30,000 people in its heyday. The House of Faun, for example, was a clear example of how rich Romans lived their lives in Pompeii. It was a huge house that even had 2 gardens inside, taking up the entire block. They looked like they were made of white marble, but it was actually painted stucco. It was clear to researchers that only aristocrats lived there. Then there was this famous forum. This is where most of the administrative part of the city life happened. It was made up of a lot of different buildings, like the Basilica, a hotspot for political and civil meetings, the Macellum, which was a market, and several temples. If we were visiting this back in the day, we'd see a bunch of men dressed in tunics. A few select ones would wear togas, those heavy white pieces of draped cloth that look like bed linen wrapped over the body. Togas were mainly used on special occasions since they were costly, hard to wash, and considered a traditional costume. Representatives running for office would use it during their campaign run so that commoners would identify them as candidates. One can't forget about the Villa of the Mysteries. Cool name, huh? It was called that way because of some mysterious frescoes found inside of it. Modern-day archaeologists still haven't figured out what the scenes painted are trying to depict. Probably some type of ritual or ceremony. By the way, a villa is simply a large suburban Roman-style house. It's not necessarily a super posh place where the rich and beautiful live. It's usually located on the outskirts of town, near the city's walls. The Villa of the Mysteries one, in particular, was found astoundingly well preserved in modern archaeological excavations. It even had a manufacturing area inside of it, like its own little industry. It was common for richer Romans to own big farmlands, like olive gardens, for example. So they would also build a processing station inside their villas to extract the oil and package the whole thing. The amphitheater was where some of the richer men paid to put on gladiator fights for the rest of the town. It was built around 70 BCE, and it was one of the oldest amphitheaters of the world. It was even older than the Colosseum in Rome. This huge building could fit around 20,000 spectators at once. The seating was arranged by social class, so you could easily spot who was a member of the nobility. And in case you're wondering why it was shaped like a weird egg, it's because that was the shape that allowed for an unobstructed view wherever you were in the crowd. As every other Roman city, Pompeii also had some famous baths. Since not every house had access to plumbing back in the day, most people didn't shower in their homes. That's why so many Romans would use public baths, usually at the end of the day, to clean themselves. But make no mistake, this wasn't just a place for bathing, it was a cultural hotspot. The baths were made up of many different rooms. The first one was like a locker room, where people would keep their clothes and personal belongings. This is where the upper and lower classes mingled together. Someone's class could easily be identified by their clothes and jewelry. The amount of gold and silver worn back in those days is nothing compared to what most people wear today. Usually, the rich folks would leave someone to take care of their belongings while they went and took their bath. Because yes, it could happen that stuff went missing while chilling and relaxing. The big focus on self-care nowadays was already a thing for ancient Romans. It was common that before taking a bath, olive oil was rubbed all over the skin. They would scrape off the dirty skin with a strigil. That may sound weird, but also extremely pleasing. The baths had rooms for massages. Some of them had reading rooms, and even courtyards for some healthy exercise. Oh, there was even a natatio, or swimming pool if you're not fluent in Latin. After all, it was the Romans that said, "A healthy body is a healthy mind." The bakeries! Bread was one of the main components of Pompeian diet, so much so that there were around 30 bakeries in the city. Bread was freshly made from scratch every day. In a special area of the shop, the corn or wheat was ground, and mules would circle around to keep the mills going. The funny thing about Pompeians is that they like to cover the exterior walls of buildings with paintings, much like graffiti nowadays. Their paintings, usually frescoes, used to depict what daily life was like in the city. Ancient Romans were very outdoorsy people, so coloring their walls seemed like a good option for them. A lot of houses had frescoes inside of them too, to make up for the lack of windows. The paintings gave the house owners the illusion of more space if the painting was of, let's say, a garden, for example. Over the years, archaeologists have uncovered all kinds of stuff on runestones, curses, poems, protective magic spells, and even inheritance disputes. However, a newly uncovered ancient Norse artifact known as Svingerud stone has just one word on it. Sounds boring, right? Well, think again, because this might just be the oldest runestone ever discovered, almost 2,000 years old. But that's not all. Excavations are still ongoing, and depending on what follows next, it could unravel secrets and the true meaning behind the mysterious magical runes. So let's explore and see just how much known history you can rewrite with only one engraved word on a stone. A long time ago, during the first few centuries of the Common Era, Scandinavians and Romans crossed paths. They traded goodies like glass and silver, and eventually, Roman customs and even written culture ended up north. The Nords liked the Roman alphabet but wanted their own letters copyrighted, so they decided to create their own unique characters, which they called runes. Almost 20 centuries later, in 2021, archaeologists were excavating an Iron Age burial site near the village of Svingerud in eastern Norway. Among the cremation graves, they uncovered a reddish sandstone slab that would become a centerpiece in a major Norwegian archaeological discovery. It's the size of a coffee table, measuring just over 12 inches across. The stone was found buried with burned bones and charcoal, part of an early cremation grave. The stone had runes engraved into it, looking rough and shallow, like they were scratched with the tip of a knife or something needle-like. Runestones are not unusual. Archaeologists are used to uncovering runic inscriptions, especially in this region. However, tests show that both the burial site and the carving on the stone likely date back to somewhere between the 1st and 3rd centuries. That places it deep in pre-Viking history, centuries before the Viking Age officially began around 800 CE. That makes it one of the oldest reliably dated examples of early writing in Scandinavia. When you look at these carvings, they either look like magical symbols made to call on Nordic deities to help you, or like random scratches made by an angry man hitting a stone with something sharp. But these are real letters, crude but intentional. It's an ancient writing system used by Germanic tribes across Northern Europe. They were engraved into wood, bone, or stone. Their shapes are straight, angular lines because curves were tough to carve with the tools they had back then. When they met with the Roman Empire, rather than just borrowing Latin letters, the Germanic tribes took the idea of writing and carved out their own version. The original alphabet was called Elder Futhark. It had 24 letters. We can find them on artifacts dating from around the 2nd to the 8th century CE. Its name comes from its first 6 letters: F, U, Th, A, R, and K. Each rune probably had a name that matched the sound it made. For example, the rune that sounds like A was called Anzus. However, nobody from back then left us a memo explaining the names. In fact, the knowledge of how to read them was forgotten until 1865, when Norwegian linguist Sophus Bugge deciphered them by comparing clues. He examined later rune alphabets and ancient poems that referenced the runes, like a detective sketching a suspect from scattered witness clues. For many runes, especially the oldest ones in the Elder Futhark, the meaning is still open to interpretation. They weren't common knowledge, which is reflected by the fact that only some 350 surviving inscriptions remain. This changed eventually when the Scandinavian language evolved from Proto-Norse into Old Norse, spoken by mighty Vikings. The Elder Futhark was reduced from 24 to 16 runes to reflect the changes in the language, thus becoming the Younger Futhark, which was far better spread. Runes weren't really used to write books or keep daily records. Instead, you'd find them carved on gravestones, weapons, and various tools. It's believed that people used runes to show ownership, honor loved ones who had passed away, leave short messages, or sometimes for protection or magic. In the early days, some runes probably had special spiritual or ritual meanings too. One interesting fact about runestones specifically is that they were often used for self-promotion or boasting, like an ancient social media status or a tweet posted on a wall, or better said, a stone. One such example of a runestone from the 11th century where a man named Vigmund had it carved for himself, calling himself the cleverest of men. He even added that he was a ship captain, and yes, he made sure everyone knew that while he was alive. In the Old Norse poem Havamal, Odin says he hung on the world tree for 9 nights, pierced by a spear, to gain knowledge of the runes. This goes to show just how powerful and mystical those symbols were perceived to be. It's fitting that the word rune comes from a Proto-Germanic word which can be translated as secret or whisper. There's a common saying about power being in words, and for the old Germanic tribes, that power felt like actual magic. It's also why it's important to know when this magic came to be. And the Svingerud runestone tells us that. But it's not just when it was written, it's also what's written on it, where and why. The location where the Svingerud stone was discovered is already a significant archaeological site. It's famous for its incredible discoveries, including the remarkable Jormunbu helmet, the only Viking helmet ever found in Norway. The stone was placed in a cremation pit, alongside the remains of an adult and a few personal items. Thanks to charcoal and bone samples, researchers can figure out how old the runestone is by using a method called radiocarbon dating. The Svingerud stone isn't the first ancient Norse artifact with runes that archaeologists have discovered, not even close. People carved runes into all sorts of everyday objects like combs, jewelry, and knives long ago. Some of those might even be just as old. Other finds have runes, but they're often broken, loose, or don't have clear dating. However, with radiocarbon dating, scientists have confirmed that the Svingerud stone is really the oldest runestone ever found. The writing on it suggests that it was part of a ritual and might have even been a message to the deceased. The inscription isn't long. It's just one word, Idiburg. No one knows exactly what it means. The clearest part says Idibera, and most researchers agree it's probably a name. Maybe Idibera in a genitive form, meaning of Idibera or belonging to Idibera. So this could be the name of the person buried there or someone being honored. There's a decent chance it's a female name, possibly making this the earliest known female rune inscriber in history. But researchers now believe that the Svingerud runestone is a part of a bigger monument. They found more than a dozen sandstone pieces scattered across several graves at the site, and when they assembled them in the lab, they fit together like a puzzle. This suggests they all came from one single upright stone. The main piece with the inscription was found in one grave, but other similar pieces were buried in nearby cremation pits. Archaeologists think it was broken and reused in a ritual, maybe to connect different people or generations who had been buried there. Instead of just marking one grave, it might have first been a memorial and was later put back into the other graves as a symbolic act. Some even speculate that the runes might have been carved by different hands throughout various time periods. The Svingerud stone might be small, but as the oldest runestone ever found with a secure archaeological context, it could be the key to how writing first took root in Northern Europe. This Norwegian archaeological discovery proves that runes were already tied to ritual, memory, and maybe even women. And if it's just a fragment of a larger monument, we've only seen part of the picture. Ancient Norse artifacts like this reshape what we know about pre-Viking history. And with luck, more runestones will follow, maybe even from another female rune inscriber. Deep inside the heart of the Amazon rainforest lies a cave so massive, It defies logic. Stretching for 2,000 feet, this tunnel is so big a human could easily walk around inside of it. Its walls are etched with deep, mysterious claw marks. But this is just one of many. If you travel to the south of Brazil, you'll stumble upon over 1,500 similar caves, ranging from modest tiny burrows to massive passageways. These are not your average spooky, bat-filled caverns. They're what researchers call paleo burrows, also known as ancient underground structures dug by creatures so colossal they make modern elephants look small. Whatever creature dug those tunnels displaced 800 elephants worth of dirt. I know, it still looks like a normal cave, but experts noticed this one was special because the walls were too neat and rounded, and the floor was too smooth. Besides, no water or erosion leaves such signs of serious digging power. These Brazilian caves are the largest geological records of animal activity on the planet. It's like stumbling into a prehistoric house made by creatures the size of cars. To unlock this mystery, researchers analyzed the scratch marks on the walls and realized they had probably been made by giant ground sloths, a species called valgipes, which could weigh nearly 9,000 pounds and eat your average annual menu in about 3 days. Despite being huge, these animals were not earthbenders. They had to work in groups if they wanted to dig such long tunnels. This is why scientists believe many sloths shared the same tunnel and dug it together. Even some giant armadillos may have helped with the digging. After all, they were ridiculously skilled excavators and lived there too. Okay, but why would a giant sloth or armadillo need a 2,000-foot-long underground lair? Great question. And the truth is, scientists aren't totally sure. It doesn't make sense for them to dig tunnels this massive just to escape predators, especially since the tunnels were big enough for a saber-toothed tiger to crawl in, for example. So, unless they installed prehistoric security systems, this theory has holes. Haha, pun intended. The best bet is probably climate. Back then, everything was drier and colder, and some species of giant sloths were living their best lives back when Earth was transitioning between cold and warmer periods. Their big bodies usually protected these animals from temperature changes, but drastic fluctuations probably made them hide in order to survive. Besides, just like modern sloths, giant sloths probably had a hard time maintaining their body temperature, and going underground for a while is a great way to protect your babies and save some energy. After all, the bigger you are, the more energy you spend. Some scientists believe these tunnels might have had rotating tenants. One sloth moves in, digs a bit, leaves some scratch marks, moves out. And sometime later, another one crashes there and adds its own decor touches. A hostel for ancient megafauna. All evidence points to a more timeshare situation than a prehistoric private property. After all, these creatures weren't exactly social butterflies. Most sloths and armadillos usually keep things strictly one-on-one, just mom and baby. Yeah, dad sloth stuck around only for the good part. But you probably noticed one tiny detail here. These guys are not around anymore. They went extinct 11,000 years ago, right around the time humans started to get popular on Earth, when another ice age was ending. In fact, 80% of all mammals that were heavier than 2 pounds disappeared then. The first culprit is, of course, the usual suspect: humans. Around 10,000 years ago, a wave of skilled hunters using distinctive tools like spear points spread across North America. The theory goes that American animals weren't used to this new predator, making them easy targets. Once the big plant eaters started vanishing, the big meat eaters followed. They didn't have enough food to survive, and it wasn't just excessive hunting that caused some damage. Early humans may have also harmed ecosystems in ways that made survival harder for large species. But wait, there's another suspect: climate change. Around the same time, Earth's climate got a major shakeup. The climate was going from super cold to only slightly cold. Just so you know, Earth's temperature was about 46 degrees Fahrenheit, making seasons change and plants perish. And if plants are no longer around, big animals that eat them, like our friends giant sloths, have less nutrition, making them even more vulnerable. Many scientists now think that both human impact and climate change played a role, just in different ways depending on the region. In some places, humans may have tipped the balance. In others, nature itself did the job. Either way, it was a perfect storm that ended the age of giants. Turns out, being huge isn't always a plus. Giant animals tend to live longer and reproduce slowly, which makes them sitting ducks when disaster strikes. Besides, it takes a long time for these guys to bounce back. After dinos disappeared, for example, it took 15 million years for new mega mammals to stomp onto the scene. The last major extinction happened around 12,000 years ago. Not really enough time for brand new massive beasts to evolve. Today's biggest ground animals, like elephants, rhinos, and bison, aren't newcomers. They're actually the tough survivors of that ancient chaos. And, well, at least we still live alongside the blue whale, the biggest mammal ever. But why did some prehistoric animals get so gigantic in the first place? Well, being big has some perks, in spite of all the extinction thing. It keeps you safe from predators and helps you win the fight for food. If plant eaters bulked up, predators had to level up too, just to keep up. And the environment plays a big role. You see, cold-blooded animals might grow bigger in hot places to stay cool, and warm-blooded giants thrive in cold places to stay warm. One paleontologist even suggested that some dino-sized vegetarians needed those massive bellies just to digest the tough, woody plants of their time, as if they had a salad bar inside their bodies. There's also the thing with oxygen. Back then, Earth's atmosphere had way more of it. That's a big deal, especially for creatures with less efficient breathing systems like insects. Higher oxygen levels meant their bodies could handle more growth and more activity, kind of like nature's turbo mode. We also have to discuss bones, specifically the lighter ones. Many huge dinosaurs had air sacs built into their skeletons, just like modern birds. This made their bones strong but not ridiculously heavy, meaning they could grow super tall or long without collapsing under their own weight. Those air sacs also helped with cooling down, which is super important when you're basically a walking oven of muscle. On the flip side, modern mammals are limited by gravity and biology. Bigger bodies need stronger hearts, lungs, and blood pressure just to keep functioning, and land doesn't offer much support. This also explains why whales got even bigger than dinosaurs. The ocean acts like a natural support system, which pretty much means that buoyancy helps hold up all that mass. So blue whales can hit a jaw-dropping 330,000 pounds without turning into pancakes. On land, that kind of size would be a serious health hazard. So ancient giants weren't just freaks of nature. They were the result of the right mix of air, food, physics, and environment working together in just the right way. The whole extinction event surely is a bummer for giant sloths that worked as gigantic engineers of nature, but it surely prevented us from sharing the planet with insects the size of crows, like some types of griffin flies or millipedes reaching almost 6 feet in length. Yikes! Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to appreciate modern sloths. Slow, small, and thankfully incapable of terraforming the landscape and giving me insect-related panic attacks.
So, check out this creature. What do you think this thing is? Is it a plant, an animal, or maybe even some kind of wild fungus? At first glance, this fossil could pass for any of those ancient life forms. And honestly, scientists have been scratching their heads over it for over 150 years. But now, it looks like we might finally be cracking the case on this unknown species discovery. A long time ago, during the Devonian period, plants were just starting to grow on land. The tallest trees were only a few feet high, and animals hadn't even evolved backbones yet. Back then, massive natural towers up to 26 feet tall and 3 feet wide, looking like branchless cylindrical tree trunks, were rising from the ground. Hey, what a contrast with trees back then. When scientists first discovered fossils of those towering organisms, They were totally confused, as these strange prehistoric creatures didn't look like anything they'd seen before. Some thought they were weird cone-bearing trees. Others guessed they might be underwater plants like giant seaweed or lichens, which are partnerships between fungi and algae. The mysterious objects received a name, Prototaxites. When scientists studied them up close, their internal structure reminded them of a bunch of different things. They couldn't believe a 20-foot-tall fungus or algae could be real, but that's what the fossils showed. Then most scientists decided that Prototaxites were giant fungi. But still, something didn't feel right about it. In 2007, they decided to finally get the Prototaxites mystery explained and ran a chemical test on the fossils. So they looked at the types of carbon inside them and compared them to regular plants from the same time. If Prototaxites were plants, the carbon ratios would match, but they didn't. That means Prototaxites weren't plants, and they received carbon in a different way, not by photosynthesis, but probably more like fungi do. But then again, they looked nothing like the mushrooms we know and love today. Prototaxites were giant, likely the largest living things on land at their time. And even if these strange prehistoric creatures were some fungi of their sort, then it's weird they don't have any living relatives today that would resemble them. So, if we put all this together, it looks like Prototaxites are an entirely different and previously unknown life form that didn't leave any offspring. Now, Prototaxites aren't the only unclassified organisms on Earth. About 600 million years ago, there were no fish, no sharks, no crabs. Just simple life forms like algae and bacteria drifting through calm, shallow seas. But some seriously strange creatures, completely unlike anything we see today, lived among them. They looked like underwater ferns, stood perfectly still, and absorbed nutrients straight from the water. These bizarre life forms were rangeomorphs. They ruled the oceans that were thick with nutrients back then. So rangeomorphs didn't need mouths, eyes, or muscles to survive and just soaked up whatever they needed. Some of them were as small as a finger, and others grew as tall as 6.5 feet. But as Earth entered the Cambrian period, the oceans became much more competitive. Fast-swimming creatures with limbs, eyes, and jaws showed up and ate the same food faster, and maybe even ate the rangeomorphs themselves. The chemistry of the oceans also started to shift, and the nutrient-rich waters became more like today's oceans, where food floats around in particles that active animals scoop up. So the rangeomorphs vanished forever, but scientists still find their fossils all over the world, preserved in ancient rock. They had an incredible fractal design, a pattern that repeated itself at every level, from the smallest branches to the full body. Using fossil clues, researchers built 3D computer models of what rangeomorphs looked like. They found out that these strange prehistoric creatures filled their space in a nearly perfect way. They were like optimized living sponges. But scientists still can't agree on where exactly rangeomorphs fit on the tree of life. At first, they argued over whether they were plants, animals, fungi, or something completely different. Now, most agree they were primitive animals, though they were so different that they might deserve their own unique branch, what scientists call a clade. And then there was Dickinsonia, another prehistoric creature that was so strange that scientists couldn't even agree on what it was for nearly 100 years. Some thought it was a giant single-celled amoeba. Others thought it was a type of lichen, or maybe a failed evolutionary experiment. This bizarre life form lived about 558 million years ago, long before dinosaurs, sharks, or even insects showed up. After many years of studies, Australian researchers finally got proof that Dickinsonia was an animal, and possibly the oldest one scientists have ever found. They solved the mystery thanks to really well-preserved fossil fat molecules stuck in the rock near the White Sea. These molecules were a type of cholesterol, the kind of fat found in animal cells. If cholesterol is present, it almost certainly came from an animal, sort of like animal DNA. Dickinsonia lived millions of years earlier than scientists had previously thought, and didn't look anything like modern animals. It had no head, no mouth, no arms, no legs, and definitely no organs. It was oval-shaped, like a giant pill bug or flattened jelly bean, with weird ridges running across its body. Some were tiny, but others grew up to 5 feet long, the size of a person. It didn't swim or walk, but was just lying on the seafloor, soaking up nutrients from the water or absorbing stuff through its skin. It was tricky to identify because most fossils came from high-pressure rock, where heat had destroyed all the delicate organic stuff scientists needed to study. To get to the good fossils, researchers had to rappel down 300-foot cliffs, dig out huge blocks of sandstone, throw them down, wash them, and then repeat the process. And inside one of those sandstone slabs was the fossil that changed everything. That helped finally confirm that Dickinsonia was an animal, which proves that complex animal life existed before the Cambrian diversification, where tons of new animals with bones, eyes, and limbs suddenly appeared. Scientists think the spot where they found these fossils might hold more clues about ancient life. For a long time, scientists had no clue what other group of ancient life forms, slime molds, were. These weird jelly-like blobs that pulse and ooze on rotten logs and forest floors aren't fungi like mushrooms, though people thought they were for years. It turns out they're more like amoebas, squishy, single-celled organisms that can move around. There are over 900 species of slime molds all over the world. You'll find them in soil, leaf litter, and especially on decaying wood. Scientists found them trapped in amber from 100 million years ago, and it looks just like modern slime molds. Scientists still know very little about how slime molds interact with other species, what role they play in ecosystems, or how they think without a brain, nerves, or a control center. But somehow, they can make decisions and adapt to their surroundings. It makes them a lot like social insects, like ants or bees, where no single bug is in charge, but the colony still works together as a smart group. Even without brains, scientists have trained slime molds to solve mazes just by responding to chemicals and learning from their environment. One way these organisms learn is through a process called habituation. It's sort of like how you get used to cold water after jumping in a lake, or stop noticing an annoying buzzing noise after a few minutes. That's your brain helping you tune out something harmless. Some slime molds can do this too. If they get in nasty conditions, like salty, dry, acidic environments or chemicals, they'll avoid them at first. But if there's food on the other side, they'll eventually get used to it and push their way through. And if you let slime mold go dormant and wake up a year later, it still remembers how to deal with salt. They even seem to be able to decide where to go based on where they found food in the past. With more and more unknown species discoveries, scientists can paint a better picture of Earth's biological past.
In 1850, French scientist Auguste Mariette went to Egypt looking for manuscripts, but accidentally found a head of a sphinx sticking out of the dunes. He cleared the sand and figured out the Sphinx was guiding the entrance to some underground construction. Several months later, he finally entered the Serapeum of Saqqara. Inside, he found an enormous granite sarcophagi with remnants of 64 bulls. Scientists are still amazed by the tech that the ancient Egyptians used to transport those enormous boxes. The Serapeum was built around the year 3000 before the Common Era. It was an underground tomb built to honor the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. It had a long hallway, almost 500 feet long, with giant stone rooms on both sides. Some of the sarcophagi weighed as much as 50 average cars, and all of them were made with super precision, with exact 90-degree angles. These sarcophagi were beautifully decorated with hieroglyphs and carvings that told stories about the lives and importance of the Apis bulls. Now, there are 24 sarcophagi left. In ancient Egypt, Apis bulls were very special animals connected to the deity Ptah. They thought the bulls carried Ptah's spirit and wisdom, helped the pharaoh, and protected the Egyptians. Priests looked for special markings on young bulls to find Apis bulls. It could be a white triangle on its forehead, which symbolized divine light, a shape on its back like a vulture's wing, and a scarab shape under its tongue, which stood for rebirth. If a bull had these signs, they believed it was chosen by Ptah and treated it like royalty. The chosen bulls lived in a special temple in Memphis, the city where they worshipped Ptah. They received the best care and offerings from visitors who wanted their blessings. When an Apis bull passed away, it was treated with great honor and mummified. When Mariette entered the Serapeum, he noticed traces of rollers on the gallery's floor and found 2 wooden horizontal winches. Each had 8 levers. Later, other explorers saw double rails. The burial chambers were lower than the hallway floor. To get the boxes into place, workers filled the chambers with sand so the sarcophagi could be rolled in straight. Then they slowly removed the sand to gently lower the boxes into perfectly cut spaces in the bedrock. A carved stone sign found in the Serapeum said it took 28 days to move just one sarcophagus and its lid into its spot during the time of Ptolemy II. The extreme precision of the sarcophagi with 90-degree angles also has an explanation. Ancient Egyptians wrote texts, or rather, papyrus, on geometry a long time ago. It shows that they knew the approximate number pi and could calculate the volume of a pyramid with its top cut off. If they could figure out complicated math like that back then, it makes sense that they could also carve perfectly flat surfaces 500 years later. All this sounds pretty legit, but some people think certain things don't add up here. The size of boxes is way larger than the size of bulls, yet they buried pharaohs in tiny coffins that barely fit their bodies. The sarcophagi are made out of granite with crazy precision, and they could have just used limestone, which would have made things way easier. The transportation of the boxes seems pretty simple, but only in theory. If one person could pull about 440 pounds, then at least 250 people would be needed to pull just one box. The tunnels in the Serapeum are really narrow, only about 2 feet wider than the boxes themselves. There's no way hundreds of people could have squeezed into those tight spaces to pull the boxes. And even if they did, how would they turn the box in the cramped corridor, lower it into its niche, and place it perfectly in the middle? Somehow they did this 24 times, and every box is centered perfectly. Plus, the chambers were dusty, and there were no signs of soot from lamps. This means they must have worked in almost complete darkness. The real use of the boxes could also be different. A long time ago, even before the Egyptian pharaohs ruled, the local people already knew how to use fermentation. It happens when tiny organisms called yeast eat certain ingredients like starch and turn them into gas and ethanol. So someone in ancient Egypt probably put food like barley, bread, and even meat inside a giant stone box, then closed it tight with a heavy lid. These stone boxes, carved from granite, were so precisely made that they were almost completely sealed, so nothing could escape from it. As the yeast inside the box started working, it created more and more CO2 gas. It built up pressure inside the box. The granite boxes were incredibly strong. They could handle more pressure than a car tire can hold. When granite was squeezed under such pressure, its crystals produced a tiny electric charge. This effect was possible because granite contains quartz, a material that reacts to pressure this way. The process also needed meat or animal parts, possibly to help the yeast grow better. Meat contains something called oleic acid, which yeast needs to keep growing and to survive the bad effects of the ethanol it produces. As the pressure inside the box kept growing, the combination of gases and electricity made these boxes not just ancient fridges, but powerful energy systems. Over time, the pressure inside got so strong that it could push the lid open and the gas would escape with a pop. But when people rediscovered the Serapeum in 1850, they found old drawings that showed piles of stones stacked on top of some of the box lids. So, someone long ago probably tried to make the lids even heavier by adding extra weight to make it harder for the gas pressure to push them open. This extra weight also meant the quartz crystals in the granite could keep creating more electricity under all that pressure. If someone opened one of these stone boxes thousands of years later, they would only find bones from bulls that were placed in the box. And that's exactly what Mariette discovered in the 1850s. They opened the Serapeum for visitors soon after the first excavations in the second half of the 19th century. Prince of Wales even had a luncheon with his guests in one of the sarcophagi. Sands and earthquakes made the site inaccessible for a while, but now you can visit it again and try to solve the mystery yourself. With new tech, we could have answers to many other historical mysteries soon. A team of scientists at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History recently used a special CT scanner to learn more about ancient Egyptian mummies without unwrapping them. They gently rolled 26 mummies on custom carts out to the parking lot, where the scanner was waiting. It took thousands of detailed X-ray pictures of each mummy and their coffins. When all the pictures were put together, they created 3D images that showed what was inside, the skeletons, and some artifacts. The scientists hope these images will help them understand ancient Egyptian burial practices from over 3,000 years ago. Even though the scanning process only took 4 days, it might take 3 years to study all the data. But scientists were able to learn some personal details about the mummies. One of the most popular mummified individuals at the museum, Lady Chineta, was a woman who lived in ancient Egypt about 3,000 years ago. It looks like she passed away in her late 30s or early 40s. To make sure her body looked complete for the afterlife, embalmers put stuffing in her neck to keep it from collapsing. They also placed artificial eyes in her sockets, so she would have eyes in the next world. She was wrapped in fancy linen and placed in a beautifully decorated coffin. The scans revealed that it had been carefully crafted with a slit at the back, which embalmers used to fit the body. There were also some artistic details on the surface, like markings for her knees. It looks like her burial was on the scale of a high-end luxury car. Tunnels, metro, underground systems, and even secret passageways to the houses of the rich and famous. Why else do we need tunnels, you may wonder? To hide. Many cities have underground tunnels and even underground doppelgangers. Now let's make it clear. Those passages are normally not connected, contrary to the popular rumor claiming that it was possible to get from Scotland to Turkey using underground passageways built around 5,000 years ago. I mean, it sounds insane even today. Imagine building it back in the day. These tunnels have an official name, the Erdstall Tunnels, and they were most likely built in the Middle Ages. However, we still don't have the exact information about the date. The highest concentration of those tunnels are in Bavaria, Germany, but there are many of them in Great Britain and France too. Erdstall tunnels, a unique type of earthen passage found globally, are characterized by their narrow, oval-shaped corridors and tight choke points, known as schlups, or slip-outs. Despite speculation, their purpose remains a mystery. However, some of those tunnels have fireplaces and even vents, which might mean those were used primarily for shelter. Dating back to the Middle Ages, possibly as early as the 12th century, Erdstall tunnels lack archaeological signs and historical records. So it's not a surprise that there are many rumors about their use. Some scientists are sure those were storage spaces, though their narrowness makes this impractical. Another idea is that they provided hiding spots for farmers during tribal raids. However, their single entry point raises doubts about their effectiveness in evading threats. Now, if you're feeling like Indiana Jones and want to venture into those tunnels, you're in luck. A few structures, like the Erdstall Radkobluken in Austria, welcome visitors to explore these enigmatic structures. Most of them are closed to the public eye, though. The origins of Erdstall tunnels remain largely unknown, just like their real functions. And if you think, hey, it's the 21st century here, we can study pretty much everything, well, you're wrong. What makes these tunnels hard to study are the tight confines. Traditional surveying methods often prove inadequate in such spaces. To solve this problem, scientists use a handheld device that integrates an RGB camera, a gyroscope, and high-resolution depth sensors, allowing them to capture intricate details of the tunnels. They also use modern techniques like 3D surveying in hopes of uncovering the true origins and purposes of those tunnels. One hypothesis even suggests they may have been poorly conceived dwellings, abandoned when their inadequacies became apparent. Still, not everyone quite agrees with this idea. Other theories suggest they served spiritual purposes, while the most intriguing idea speculates that those tunnels may be remnants of extraterrestrial civilizations. Experts believe they may have been used for practical matters, such as granaries or hiding spots from looters. As we don't have exact info on who built it and when, it may be pretty much anyone, even a sloth. Nope, I'm not a lunatic. Sloths can build giant tunnels. Check this out. In 2009, a farmer in southern Brazil was driving his tractor through a cornfield when it suddenly sank into the ground. He quickly discovered he had broken through the top of an underground tunnel. When researchers came to investigate, they found a tunnel around 6.5 feet high and the same 6.5 feet wide, extending about 50 feet long right beneath the farmer's house. When they looked closer, they instantly saw deep claw marks on the walls. That was the proof the tunnel wasn't human-made. So that thing the farmer uncovered was a megafauna paleoburrow, a prehistoric tunnel dug by ancient creatures like giant ground sloths or giant armadillos from over 10,000 years ago. I know, it's hard to imagine those beasts, but let me help you. Take a hamster. Now, increase it to the size of an elephant. Don't forget, this 13-foot-tall hamster could also walk on 2 legs. During their time, around 15 million to 10,000 years ago, many species of sloths and giant armadillos roamed the Americas, some even digging similar tunnels. Today, many of these tunnels are filled with sediment, though some remain clear, similar to the one the farmer discovered. This 2009 find sparked significant interest, leading to the discovery of over 1,500 paleoburrows across southern Brazil, making it the era with the highest concentration of such sites worldwide. But no one knows exactly why there are so many of them in southern Brazil. While some paleoburrows exist throughout South America, none have been found in North America, which is weird since those huge sloths roamed the entire continent. The exact purpose of these large tunnels remains a mystery, but scientists believe they may have served as nursing spaces, temperature regulation, or hibernation areas. Tunnels likely developed over centuries as successive generations of sloths and armadillos expanded them. Now, let's take a look at fugus. No, not the Japanese fatal delicacy, and no, not a town in New Guinea. To see them, we gotta travel to the UK. So fugus are underground structures too, but they don't look exactly like tunnels. They are dry stone structures. They look as if a cave had been decorated with stones from the inside. There are only around 15 of them found so far, and most of them are located in Cornwall. According to the estimates, those tunnels were built about 2,400 years ago, and they're still in pristine condition, which is truly fascinating. I mean, back in the day, people had no cool machinery whatsoever, yet their structures still last. And if you dare to buy an apartment today, well, chances are you won't be too happy about the quality. Going back to our fugus, there's nothing extraordinary about their supposed purpose. They could be used for spiritual purposes, as a place to hide, or a food storage. The latest application, though, is a bit weird. I guess it's not a secret for anyone that England is famous for its excessive humidity. And if you want to store your food properly, you gotta avoid the humidity at all costs. Otherwise, say welcome to mold and fungi. But ancient people weren't dull-witted at all, or they wouldn't have survived, and you and I wouldn't be around now. So they might have adapted those fugus to store just some products, those that already had natural molds in them, assisting in the preservation of perishable food, like milk, butter, and cheese. But hey, those are just speculations. The true reason why they were built remains unknown. What makes fugus unique is that they are intentionally built tunnels, not just excavated mines like those in Wales. They were crafted by digging deep trenches, lining them with stone slabs, covering them with capstones, and then filling over them. all of which took significant time and effort. Still, no matter how hard those were to construct, cities around the globe are often built over intricate tunnel systems, each unique to its location. For instance, Paris is famous for its extensive underground quarries, which were abandoned years ago, but still pose a risk of collapse in certain areas above. London boasts one of the largest tunnel networks in the world, including many that were specifically created for military purposes. In New York City, there are rumors of secret tunnels, while Los Angeles has old tunnels from the Prohibition era used for speakeasies. Many other cities also have their share of enigmatic tunnels, and surprisingly, Florida is no exception. It happened in the year 2011 in Ybor City. Near a former post office, flooding uncovered something weird, a section of an unknown structure. Back then, people didn't pay much attention to that, so it took another 7 years to discover something truly fascinating. This historic neighborhood was founded in the 1880s, but it remained unknown until 2018 that it also has a hidden tunnel network. We only learned of it because of renovation work. The exact purpose, of course, is unknown, but most scientists are pretty sure that they serve to connect to early gaming spots and the port of Tampa. Figuring out how extensive the tunnel network is tricky. In 2018, a historic home in Seminole Heights revealed locked doors leading to tunnels from the 1920s. One local even said he traveled through a tunnel for 20 minutes. Rumors suggest some tunnels connect to the Hillsborough River and Ybor City. Research is ongoing, but no new info has emerged yet.
The ancient Indian texts mention beautifully decorated chariots or entire palaces called vimanas that could take off and, in a matter of seconds, fly away as far as space. Some people believe these vimanas only existed in Indian mythology, but it's also possible that they were based on a real technology that had been lost over the centuries. According to the Vedas, ancient Indian religious texts, there was the elephant vimana with several engines and many other types named after animals and birds. There was one for local travel, one for visiting different countries, and one for traveling to the moon and various planets. They could develop a great speed. One vimana had the superpower of invisibility. Another one was shaped like a sphere and was built on the winds produced by Mercury. This vimana was said to generate an enormous ray like the sun and make noise like the storm's thunder. All the vimanas were unbreakable and perfect for attacks on foes. Now, to operate a vimana, you'd need to know a lot of stuff, pretty much like today's airplane pilots. 32 secrets in total. They'd cover the aircraft structure and the secrets of taking off and maneuvering without crashing. That's a good thing. The pilot was also expected to know how to be seen and unseen, how to be hidden, how to be quick, how to manage contractions and expansion, and many other tricks. To hide the flying machine from foes, the pilot was instructed to move to the 8th atmospheric layer above the Earth and use the power of dark solar rays. This instruction might sound a bit weird, but there were others, more realistic ones, which still make sense in modern aeronautics. There are sections of ancient texts on the vimanas that focus on details like flight paths, pilot training, navigation, and even suitable clothes for pilots and recommended food for long flights. There was also a lot of technical detail about the use of heat-absorbing metals, the metals utilized, and melting points. The supporters of the theory that the vimanas were more than just myths are sure that the ancient Indians would unlikely go into all these details just for a beautiful story. So, the flying palaces might have been real and way ahead of their time, like many other great Indian inventions. Back in the 6th century BCE, an Indian physician named Sushruta basically wrote the original guide to medicine and surgery. They even called him the father of surgery for his work. Sushruta laid down the details on hundreds of medicinal plants and described complex surgical procedures. He gave instructions on nose reconstructions and skin transplants from one part of the body to another. The original method of rhinoplasty, which involved taking a piece of skin from the forehead to reconstruct the nose, is still used today. But back then, it had a slightly different purpose than surprising your followers on social media. Those nose jobs helped out folks who had lost their noses as punishment for crimes or in fights. Now you gotta thank an ancient Indian math prodigy for the invention of zero. It might not seem like a big deal, but without it, we would have no binary system and no computers. People before the 5th century CE were only thinking about some sort of a sign to indicate nothing. The invention made addition, subtraction, and other mathematical operations a whole lot easier. You can see the oldest zero in existence carved in the wall of a temple in Gwalior, India. The Indus Valley Civilization was using rulers in 1500 BCE and earlier. Made from ivory, these rulers were found during excavations in what is present-day Pakistan and northwestern India. They were widely used in architecture with amazing accuracy. They had units corresponding to slightly over 1 inch that were marked with precise subdivisions within 5/1000ths of an inch. The next invention is more of a concept than a physical item. Standardization is all about setting the rules based on a bunch of people, things, or interests. One of its cool applications that we've all gotten used to is standard weights. Whether you're using pounds or kilograms, you need these universal measurements for weight, right? For this, we owe a big shout-out to the merchants from the Indus Valley Civilization who lived around 4,000 years ago. They were measuring everything from food grains to fancy luxury goods using these standardized weights. And their weights had decimal and binary mathematical systems going on. They didn't have high-tech gear, but they pulled off some serious precision using complex calculations and even sand for construction. Their art of standardization made its way to Persia and Central Asia, basically becoming the global weight-watching standard. So if yoga is your go-to exercise, you definitely have a personal reason to appreciate the ancient Indian geniuses. Over 5,000 years ago, during the rule of the Indus Sarasvati civilization in northern India, yoga was first mentioned in the Vedas. Yoga was refined and shaped over the centuries until it grew into a massive teaching with over 200 sacred writings dedicated to this way of obtaining enlightenment. At the beginning of the current era, yoga got a new trajectory thanks to a Hindu writer who laid down a system of yoga in his text, the Yoga Sutras. It became a whole-body rejuvenation, a life-extending practice with poses that you are still doing on the mat today. Yoga has reached the Western world only in the 19th century, and it caught on like wildfire. Chess, the all-time top game for intellectuals, is also an Indian invention. Its ancestor was called Chaturanga, and it was a strategic board game that started gaining popularity around 3,000 years before the current era. This early Indian version of chess was played by 4 people, not 2, and had 64 squares. Each player had 8 pieces, ranging from pawns to kings, bishops to knights, and there was no standard 6-faced dice. They rolled with an oblong one. Players facing off were actually allies, forming 2 teams based on the direction they sat. Chess, that we know and love today, was first mentioned in ancient Indian literature in a legend. It said that the wife of a villain called Ravana had invented the game to amuse him. Now, the word shampoo comes from the Hindi word, which means to soothe or knead. The substance was invented in India in 1762 and was originally used for head massages, hence the name. The first shampoo was made of natural oils and herbs. British traders fell in love with the idea and brought it back with them to England. It took years for the original head massage oil to evolve into shampoo as we know it today, but it's still an Indian invention. Unlike the ancient Greeks, who wore animal skins, the Indians started cultivating cotton back in the 5th and 4th centuries before the current era. They used cotton threads to produce fabrics that soon became a huge hit in the Mediterranean and beyond. Jute and wool also have their origins in India. Cashmere, the finest and most exclusive type of wool, actually comes from the Kashmir region of India. Buttons that sit proudly on that cashmere cardigan of yours also have ancient Indian origins. Some 5,000 years ago, the Indus Valley civilization started cutting seashells into geometric shapes with tiny holes in them. First, they were just decorations, but then people started using them to fasten clothes. Now, when you think about radio communication pioneers, Marconi's name usually steals the spotlight. He got a Nobel Prize in Physics in 1909 for his groundbreaking radio work. But there's an unsung hero in the radio waves game, and his name is Sir Jagdish Chandra Bose. He spilled the beans on radio communication way back in 1895. He shot an electromagnetic wave across 75 feet at the town hall in Calcutta, and it went through walls, rang a bell, and even set off some gunpowder. Marconi took a page from Bose's book, using his invention, the Mercury Coherer, as a blueprint for his own two-way radio. Bose didn't patent his genius creation, so he only got his credit a century later.
Tartesos, a mysterious, highly developed society that once flourished and then, without any warning, suddenly disappeared. Moreover, before they were completely gone, they performed some strange rituals, as if they were trying to save themselves from something. But what happened to these people? Let's try to find out. Let's go to the southwest of Spain, to about 2,500 years ago. Once, there was a beautiful city here, a trade center of Tartesos. Imagine the temple in the middle of a deserted town. A breathtaking, monumental two-story building. There's a thick smell of frying meat in the air, and the smoke from its frying rises high into the sky, covering the patterns of the sanctuary. The sun has already set, and it's time to prepare for the ritual. We enter the ancient monumental hall. Inside, hundreds of people gather around a long wooden table lined with delicate ceramics and bronze bowls. They feast and drink. These people have much more fun than the animals outside the building. These animals are being prepared for the ritual. Horses, cows, pigs, donkeys, even dogs. All of them were brought here to appease the deities. And what happens after the ritual itself is even crazier. At the end of the ceremony, people take torches and set fire to the whole building. Everything turns to ashes and coals. And when the last embers fade away, they take shovels and begin to bury this place. It will take them at least several days to bury the former sanctuary under piles of earth. They work tirelessly. In some places, the thickness of the layers of mud and clay will reach almost 14 feet. And then these people, the last known Tartessians, just leave this place and disappear from our world forever. But what just happened? Why did they even do all this? Let's start from the beginning. Tartesos was first mentioned in Greek and Roman texts thousands of years ago, but for a long time, we had no idea what it even was. All the descriptions were contradictory and confusing. Some archaeologists thought that Tartesos was a kind of seaport. Others thought that it was a river or a water reservoir. They even said this place could be connected with the mystical Atlantis. But there was nothing to back it up with, so the scientific community quickly rejected this idea. But today, we know the truth. Tartesos was an ancient civilization. It's been located on the Iberian Peninsula, one of the southernmost islands of Europe. It flourished in the 9th to 5th centuries BC, and then, around 2,500 years ago, suddenly disappeared. They were quite rich. The island had rich reserves of metal, so their economy was thriving. Silver, copper, lead, and other good things were mined in the local Sierra Morena mountains. Almost all the locals were engaged in trade. For them, it was a common thing. Isn't that strange that there were so few records left about them? And not so many monuments of their culture have survived to this day. In total, throughout Spain, scientists were able to collect around 20 archaeological finds related to Tartesos. 3 of them were excavated in the Guadiana Valley: Canto Roano, Casas del Toruñuelo, and La Mata. Let's start with the first one. Cancho was discovered in 1978. This find was one of the most significant pieces of the puzzle. This is one of the most beautifully preserved structures of the Tartessian civilization. Not only the walls have survived to this day, but so did the altar, the moat, and even several artifacts. For example, some jewelry and wine glasses. It was a square building surrounded by a deep moat filled with water. And, to be honest, we still don't know its exact purpose. We only assume that it could be an ancient temple. Some rituals were carried out there. For instance, they would set fire to the temple and cover it with thick layers of sand and clay. They even left some expensive artifacts inside, tools, gold jewelry, and so on. Moving on to the next find. Casas del Turruñuelo is one of the best preserved buildings in the entire Western Mediterranean. We only discovered it a couple of years ago, back in 2015. And it hasn't been studied that well yet, but we already know that this place is also pretty weird. Casas del Turruñuelo was a very rich building. It wasn't just some kind of temporary camp. It was a place of monumental, impressive architecture. Massive staircases, vaulted ceilings, luxurious materials brought from all over the Mediterranean, and the latest construction technologies. It was supposed to be a place of power, maybe even something like a palace. And yep, it also became the venue for the rituals. It's unclear whether the locals intended to destroy this beautiful place from the very beginning, but this is where they performed the greatest ritual in the area. This ritual involved more than 50 animals, including the most valuable ones, horses. It was their only means of transportation. The fact that these people gave away their horses may indicate that they planned to stay here for some time. Perhaps they hoped to appease the deities and settle on local lands. The ritual was carried out exactly as they intended. And just like Cancho Ruano, this place was also set on fire. When the ritual ended, the locals buried this place and left, disappearing into the countryside of the Iberian Peninsula. Now it's an abandoned and quiet place. Just like Cancho Ruano, it's been standing here untouched for more than 2,000 years. The last find is La Mata, which was discovered much earlier than the other two, back in 1930. The resemblance between all of them was striking. La Mata had the same fate. It was burned and forgotten for centuries. All of this is very strange and mysterious. It seems like the locals were fleeing from something. Perhaps something happened that made them start building these banquet halls and arranging large-scale rituals. They thought that their deities turned away from them and tried to appease them. But unfortunately, it didn't work. As a result, they were forced to leave their temples and soon disappeared altogether forever. And by the way, why did they disappear at all? Well, this is another mystery of this civilization. One of the most important questions is, did they know that they were going to disappear? Or was it something unexpected? Did they suffer some kind of sudden catastrophe from which they were trying to escape? Or something else? Scientists have several theories on this. The first theory says that there may have been several major earthquakes and subsequent tsunamis in this region. These natural disasters destroyed local settlements and severely demoralized the survivors. Perhaps they were looking for salvation from this. Another theory is that there were some problems with trading. Since they were rich in metal and lived off their economy, any problems in it could lead to big troubles. If they had some kind of mining crisis, then relations between different nations could worsen greatly, and things could get pretty nasty. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. The most current theory says that around the 6th century BC, a large-scale tsunami hit the port. This greatly damaged the economy, which worsened the relationship between Tartesos and its neighbors. In any case, this seems to be speculation. This place is like a dream come true for archaeologists. It stores a huge amount of information and secrets that we have yet to unravel. The Tartessians had no idea that by burying their artifacts, they were making a real gift to the scientists of the future. And while scientists continue to study them, we can check out the stuff they have already discovered. History lovers can see Tartessian tools, horse figurines, and decorated ivory in the Archaeological Museum of Badajoz. Let's hope that in the future, scientists will learn more interesting things about this civilization, and we'll finally find out what happened to them.